Amen. So the subject of our classes that we've had thus far, yesterday and today, has been to address why the Levites are not joining us in the history from 2019 to 2021, which is often called Raphaelitopanium. In Elder Tess's classes, she's actually beginning to address this issue of why we identify Panium to be this waymark here, 2019, and what it actually means to us. We've seen, hopefully, that the reason that they're not coming in is because we're not ready. There's a special work that God is doing for us, and there's no harmony in the movement. Maybe no harmony is too strong a word. Maybe there's a lack of harmony. Maybe that might be more appropriate. So I don't know what title you want to have for these studies. Maybe, why no Levites? Where are the Levites? We then discussed what the symbology of a priest, Levite, and Nethinim is. And hopefully we've seen that those symbols are nothing more than those people who have accepted the message. Before we continue, I want to remind everybody that not everyone is wearing their name tag. I did say if you don't wear your name tag, I prefer you don't come to this class. So, you provide you with name tags, can you please make sure that you wear them? If you don't come to the class. It's a sign of respect for the organisers. So can we please adhere to that rule? And can we all remember where we sat in the previous class so we're not sitting in the same place, at least in my classes. You need to rotate the people. I don't want people at the back all the time. So please remember that, because there are people in the front now who were there this morning. So we've looked at the priests, Levites and Nethinims. We just said church and then the world. This morning we discussed the fact that why is the church coming twice? I'm suggesting it's because not everyone in the church has heard this message. It's either that option or these people have two chances. Even though we haven't discussed any scriptural quotes that address this issue, I think most of us would accept this principle that is given for humans to live once. We have one opportunity for probation, not two. We could go to inspired quotes to defend that position. If we were to use just that logic, we'd have to ask ourselves, how comes these Levites have two probations, two opportunities? So we just want to clarify what the word probation means. Hey, brother? What does probation mean? Testing. Probation means to test. Sometimes we use it in a slightly odd way to mean what? Mercy. Sometimes people think that probation means mercy. And perhaps the reason we think that is because you get sent to prison, and if you are sentenced to 10 years, what do they allow you to do? Come out after the end of 8 years. And we say, that was very merciful of them. And we say those people are now on probation for 2 years. And we see that as mercy. But what it actually is those people are being tested to see if they're going to be on their best behaviour. And if they're not, they have to complete the 2 years of sentencing. So probation is testing. If we take that concept, then we're saying that the Levites, or this line is teaching that this group of people are going to be tested twice. And I think just conceptually, we could find inspired quotes that would argue against that. So I want to suggest what is being taught here, in fact, is that the church does not receive, the whole of the church does not receive the message. So we've got church in church, but we could put church 1, church 2. That's a simplistic overview of what these lines teach. The reason why it becomes complex is because these lines overlap one another. Then people said, well, if the whole church doesn't hear it at the same time, maybe the whole world doesn't hear it at the same time. So therefore, we would have to have 2 lines for the world, and we don't. There are enough testimonies and inspiration to show that that's not the case. Whether you go to priests, Levites, and Nethinim from the book of Ezra, whether you go to the book of Luke to find the priest, Levite, and the Nethinim, it's not the only place that you can go to, but it's relatively easy to show that that's the case. In fact, people have spoken about this quite frequently thus far. This is the cross. This is Pentecost. Panium as well. Pentecost in the line of Christ. What happens there? What happens at Pentecost? Someone put their hand up. In relation to what we're discussing. It's not a random question, my sister.
Yeah, but Pentecost, the disciples go back to the church. They take the message back to the church.
So at Pentecost, the disciples, you framed it in the sense that they go back. Maybe we could say they continue, but either way, they go and give a message to the church. 3,000 are baptized in the day. So we see in the line of Christ, straight from the gospel, straight from the New Testament story, you go to the book of Acts, you can see this. The church have 2 opportunities. If you were to take the story as written and were to apply it now, my sister said it in the framework that they go back to the church. Who is actually receiving this information at Pentecost? My sister, who's receiving the information at Pentecost? We know it's the church. A bit more detail. You.
The disciples went back to the church.
Okay, so I know it's the Jewish church because that's the only church that there is. So we know it's the church. Who is it? That's the symbology that we use. Go back to the story. What does it tell you in the story? Who are these people? If you're not sure, what book are we in? What chapter? Chapter 2. So let's go there. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. Someone can give her a Bible. So we're in Acts chapter 2. The outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So tell me, who are these people? First tell me who they are in your own words and tell me which verse you picked that information from. First tell me the answer, then tell me the verse. Don't tell me the verse, give me the answer. In your words. Multitude. Which verse are you in? You're in verse 6. So if you go back one verse and read that verse, who are the people? A bit more. Sorry? Okay, so these are people from all around the world. We know they're Jews. They're there for Pentecost. Now, one of the arguments that was used before about what the world would look like in different dispensations was about technology. Remember that? Now, we know that there's rumours. We know that the Roman Empire has got good lines of communication, and yet the people from distant lands either would never have heard about what's happening, or they would have heard rumours. And if you heard rumours, what would you have heard? Version 1. What rumour would you have heard? Version 1. Sister? You live in a distant land, you hear these rumours about things going on in Jerusalem, in Galilee. There's two versions of that story. Two streams of information, if you like. What's version 1? Yeah, so tell me what version 1 says. Two streams. So tell me what stream 1 says.
So there's two streams. One stream starts with false.
I understand that. Tell me what stream 1 says.
About.
You tell me.
It's about the subject.
You tell me what the subject is, because we're in the book of Acts chapter 2. And these people are all there for Pentecost. And either, because I gave you the subject already, either they have not heard, or they've heard rumours. One of the two. Not in Acts 2, because they're already there in Acts 2. They're already there. They've heard rumours about what's going on in Jerusalem and Galilee. So you tell me what's going on in Jerusalem and Galilee.
Before the Pentecost.
That must be before, because they're already there.
No, before Pentecost, because it was at Pentecost.
Stretch back. Not a couple of days.
Christ.
Okay? Give me version 1, story 1. Rumour 1 says what?
About the cross.
What about it?
Someone was crucified.
Sorry?
Someone was crucified.
Who was crucified?
Christ.
Which is who?
It's like I'm reporting.
What is Christ? Christ is a Greek word. Okay? So, they're Hebrews. They would have used Hebrew language. So, the rumour 1 says what? The Messiah. The Messiah has come. They've heard all these rumours. The Messiah has come. He only died 50 days ago. They may have taken more than 50 days to come. They may not even know that he's died. Rumour 1, the Messiah has come. Rumour 2. Rumour 2. My sister?
Well, we're talking about the things that happened before the Pentecost.
Yes. These people have come. They either know nothing about this message, what's happened, or they've heard rumours. They can't have, no one took pictures, they don't have video, so that all they heard was second-hand information. So rumour 1, the Messiah has come. Rumour 2? Sorry? Who died? Who died? No. Who died? Can the Messiah die? Can the Messiah die? Yes or no? In their period, did they believe the Messiah can die? Okay, so who died then? Two streams of information. One true, the other is false. So who died? The false Messiah, because the true Messiah can't die. Where was Jesus born? My brother, where was Jesus born? Where was he born? Where was Jesus born? You think Jesus was born in Jerusalem? Okay, we're 2,000 years ago. Where was Jesus born? My brother in the red top. Where was Jesus born? Nazareth. There's an argument. There's two streams of information. Was he born in Nazareth or Bethlehem? We know that he's born in Nazareth because he's a Nazarite, and no prophet comes from Nazareth, so therefore he's a false prophet. So there's all these rumours that are circulating. So if you took just that one story and brought it to our line, if we're going to say that these people are Levites, do we agree that we say that they're Levites? If they're Levites, have they had an opportunity to hear the message? Put your hands up if they've had an opportunity. Yes or no? Yes, if they've had an opportunity. So, they've had opportunity? Sorry? All that was rumours. Some people, I don't think even the Romans would have even said anything. The Romans don't care about that. Pontius Pilate, does he know the difference between Barabbas and Jesus? No. He has no idea about that. He may not even have heard of Jesus. In fact, how many Jesuses are there? I shouldn't say that. How many Christs are there? How many? No. How many? Matthew 24 says what? Many Christs will arise, both before him and after. There are many false messiahs that have been raised up. It's just one of the many fanatical movements in the Jewish church. That's what the Romans would have thought. I don't think the Romans were excited about Jesus. If they were so excited about Jesus, how comes there's virtually no documented evidence from the Romans about who this great man was? Because they write about lots of things. The record of that history hasn't been destroyed or obliterated. It's there. And they don't talk about Jesus in any meaningful or sensible way. So I don't think the Romans would have given them that information. It would have been through Jewish sources. And depending on which side of the argument you're on, is the rumour that you have heard. Now, would you believe that when the Messiah comes, he's going to have all these people come around him, all these fishermen, and he's going to create bread? Would you believe that's a good Messiah story? Sorry? Would you think that's a good Messiah story if you're a Jew? No. So that's why there's all these rumours, because it all sounds crazy. He doesn't even fit the part of the Messiah. Who's the one who should have the least problem, but has a major problem? Doesn't even know what the Messiah looks like. Who's that? John the Baptist. If he can't even work out what a Messiah is supposed to do, how is anyone else supposed to? So I would contend, just in that story, you have two options. Either they don't know. All those people from Acts chapter 2 verse 5, and they were dwelling in Jerusalem. That means they don't live there, by the way. They don't live in Jerusalem. They're visiting Jerusalem. Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. And then it lists all where they're all from. These people mostly have never heard of what's going on. All the Jewish world knows that Daniel chapter 9 is being fulfilled. Its fulfillment is there. Would we agree with that? Yeah? If you go back to the story of Moses, everyone knows. If you go to the world today, everyone knows the world cannot continue like it is. Yeah? How does everybody know the world can't continue as it is? What's the big thing that's in the news nowadays? That we know the world can't continue. It's coming to its end. Climate change. So even at that basic level, everybody knows things are coming to an end. They live in hope that we could change it, we could turn it round, which is a separate issue. So either these people have never heard of it, the Messiah, or they've heard conflicting information, no accurate information. In fact, the people who are supporting Christ, when they describe what his behaviour was, how many people would believe it? What did Nathaniel say? Can any good thing come from Nazareth? Nothing can come from Nazareth that's any good. And Philip, did he give a good answer or a bad answer?
Comments.
Good answer or bad answer? Not what he said. Good answer or bad answer? It's not a good answer. He says, don't blame me. Go figure it out yourself. If we thought about the relationship between priest and Levite, and we said that to a Levite, nothing to do with me, go figure it out yourself, would we do that? Of course we wouldn't. So he's not doing a good job there. So either there are these bad rumours. The good stream says the Messiah is here. You start talking about what the Messiah is doing. Does it look good or bad? Does it? John and his disciples, John is in prison, and they're wondering, the Messiah's behaviour, is it good or bad? It's bad. Even his followers think his behaviour is bad. His family, his brothers say what? What does his brothers say about him? His brothers say you need to calm down. You're overly excited. You don't sleep enough. You're going here, there, everywhere. You're going to get our family into trouble. They all know who Jesus is. They've lived with him for 30 years. His mother is affected by all of that. And they try and get the mother to tell him off. Remember the story? He says, who is my mother? Who are my family? It's not Mary. She's not my mother. He did that twice. Disowns her at Cana, the marriage, and then disowns her a second time. Or should I say that she doesn't understand who he is. So even his closest disciples have no idea, proper idea, of what a Messiah is. Do you have a proper idea of what a Messiah is? You've got 2,000 years of history, all inspiration. Do you have any better idea of what the Messiah is than they do? Have a better idea? Or same? Same? Better. So that means we're better than them. That means we're not the same as them. That means we're not the 12 disciples. That means they don't have anything to teach us about our own bad attitude, our own lack of understanding of what a Messiah is. That's only one side. But it's extremely valid because most of us think we know all about this. How do I know I'm right on that conclusion? We'll go back 200 years. We're in the Millerite history. What are the Millerites saying? Okay, Christ is coming. We'll go with that. Christ is coming. And what are their opponents saying? Not in that context, in this context. No, the context that we're having the discussion is good or bad people. All those Christians, do they think they're good or bad? They think they're good. Do they love the Messiah? Do they? They think they do. What's the evidence that they don't? They reject the message. Early writings, Ellen White says that the rejection of the first and second angel's message. Who are they rejecting? Miller. They're rejecting Miller, but they're accepting that old Christ that they read about. They don't want to accept what kind of a Christ? The living Christ, the one that's right in front of them. His ambassador. They don't accept that Christ. They want to accept that old one. So they think that they understand. They think they've learned all the lessons of the past. And they haven't, have they? So all I want to suggest here is that I don't think the Levites know as much as we claim. Even if they've heard some studies, even if they've heard about us, we're just some crazy movement who believes strange things. And that was a couple of years ago we believed strange things. What about today? It's gone crazy, hasn't it? We're ordaining women, all wearing trousers. Our standards have dropped. There's no Sunday law. We don't really accept everything that Ellen White says. The list goes on and on with the accusations people could level against us. So, if you were in the church here, would you join this movement? You wouldn't, would you? Of course you wouldn't. You have to go and see for yourself. One good thing Philip did say, he says, I don't know, go and have a look for yourself. When Nathaniel looked, because he was honest of heart. Honest of heart means what? What's the symbol for honest of heart? Priest or Levite, isn't it? They're the ones who are honest of heart. They go and look and they find out. Are we okay with that? Okay, so that's what we tackled this morning about the church in two phases, 2 steps. Even if we don't know the answer why, the world has only got one opportunity. Maybe we're more hard-hearted. Maybe we need to unlearn more than the world has to unlearn. But we seem to need 2 steps in our history. Maybe there's a swelling that's occurring. And at the very beginning, the voice isn't loud. The first angel's not doing its work in a prominent fashion. And it takes a long time for that work to build up. Which is why when it comes to time of the world, we're strong enough, big enough, large enough to deal with that problem. So we also addressed another issue. Is it everyone in the world? Is it everyone in the church? And people are saying, no, it's not. In real life, it's not. The argument that was used for that was, if you go to the old stories, it was local and literal. But I thought we used the principle, not local, but worldwide, not literal, but spiritual. So it becomes a worldwide phenomenon. Did you have your hand up? Sister Fiona, you had your hand up? Okay. So I don't want to press that issue, but I'm inclined to think it is all of the church and all of the world. I'll just base it upon one idea. Not so much about geography and information, because we can make that excuses for the past. We can't today. Now, everyone's got a mobile phone wherever you live, even in the Seychelles. All right? Yes. So we know that there are sins. There are sins of commission. What does it mean, commission? What does commission mean? If I say sins of commission. Committed. I want to change it from committed to something else. Something that we can all grasp hold of. Doing. Who said that? Doing. Sins of commission is doing sins. There's also sins of omission. So what is that? Not doing. You've got sins that you're doing and sins that you're not doing. So if we're going to argue, at least I will, that the church has an opportunity. It has the opportunity to receive this gospel message. Even if we don't understand how. Even if we just said, take it by faith that they do. If they say, I never heard of all of this. Maybe it's a sin of omission, not a sin of commission. Sin of commission would mean a doing sin. I heard the message and I rejected it. But I would argue there are plenty of people who had the opportunity to hear the message, but they didn't take it up. The Holy Spirit could have been speaking to them. Go and sit next to this person. Pick up this leaflet. Go onto YouTube and just randomly go onto this documentary or movie or whatever it is, and they see something and the Holy Spirit says, click that. And they don't. There's many ways to conceptualize sins of omission. So that's why I would suggest all the world gets covered, whether it's a sin of commission or a sin of omission, and it will be the same with the world. Any thoughts on that? Okay, so we covered that. Then we had a few questions. We had... then I reminded us why we have all of this. All of these stories, all of these symbols are for our benefit, so that we can be trained. The more information, the more competent you are, the better trained you are. You could do it with one. Would people believe you? Perhaps, perhaps not. You do it with two, now they're forced to believe. Just because you believe something to be the truth doesn't mean you're well versed or you're skilled at delivering that truth. So we have multiple lines of evidence, multiple stories that make us a rounded group of teachers. In that process, where we're learning our job, we also become changed. By beholding, we become changed. When we look at all these stories, what we see is who? Who do we see? We see Christ. We see Christ through all of these stories. This is the Christ that we are supposed to teach the world. Not the Christ from those 4 Gospels, done in the wrong way, but the Christ that's throughout Scripture. And you see him in every single one of these stories. So we become changed, but we also become skilled. Then I asked the question, is there any information that a Levite doesn't have to know that we know? And I think most people said, yeah, they don't need to know the same things that we know. But we had some discussion, and we came to the conclusion that they need to know everything that we need to know. Do we agree with that? Yeah? So someone tell me the logic or the evidence for that they need to know what we need to know. The reason why some people think that they don't, perhaps there are 2 reasons. Nobody said directly. They come in late and they're not part of the 144,000. So we could express it this way. Maybe it's an insulting way of saying it. They're of a lower quality, or they're not as skilled as we are, not as good, and therefore they don't need to know as much. I'm arguing that they need to know exactly the same things that we need to know. So I want to get some people's, to refresh our minds of why. Sister Joy. Why do the Levites need to know everything we need to know?
They're coming from the church. The same message that brought us up in the church, the same message that should use
The Levites are coming from the church. We've already said it's the everlasting gospel that brings them out. And the message that brought us out, the same message, should be the one that brings them out. We have 2 witnesses to that. One of them is the same message that you gave us. What's the other one that we can see on the board, but perhaps not as clear? When I originally drew this, I did this. So if these are all the same, what about the rest of it? Okay, so what's the second line of evidence? It's the same message and it's... No? My brother? My sister? Speak louder. Pardon. Oh, okay, you don't... Sorry. My sister? Yes. We argued in the previous class, people's minds changed, that the information that we need to know, they need to know. So if you need to know all of this, they need to know it all. That was just one example. So they need to know everything. So people argued that perhaps they don't. I said, well, what don't they need to know? Did they need to know 2520? We said yes. So I'm saying, what evidence do we have for that? Sister Joy said, the message that brought us out of the church is the same message that's going to bring them out. And it's here on the board. The everlasting gospel brought us out, and the everlasting gospel brought them out. We're living in the same dispensation. Do you agree with that? Dispensation of the final generation, we'll call it. So the everlasting gospel should be the same gospel for that dispensation. Agree with that? The everlasting gospel in Genesis, was that the same gospel that we have? Is the wording the same? The wording is different. Did they talk about Babylon in the book of Genesis? No. Agree with that? So the wording is different. There's no first angel's message that's flying around the world. All the language is different. It's the same gospel, but the language is different. So I'll say it's a different gospel message. The message is different. But for these people, it's the same because they're all in the same dispensation. That's one line of evidence. What's the second line of evidence? That we know that there has to be the same. What we learn, they learn. So, I've drawn the lines here staggered. How else could I draw them? I've drawn them staggered, one following the other. How else could I have drawn them? The line of Christ looks like this. I want the line of Miller. Where would I put the line of Miller? Would I do this? What would I do? Start it at the same point. So, what can I do with this one? So I could do the same thing. So I could have drawn this. Priests, Levites, and Nephilims. Could do that. So if I was doing that, what would that tell you about each of those lines? Give you a choice. Same or different? They're the same. So that's our second witness. They have the same message and the line is the same. They both begin at the time of the end and they both end the second advent in that context. So the line is the same for each. So if the line is the same, you'd expect them to have all the same information, all the same requirements. Brother Rogers. Why do the Levites need to know everything we know?
What the disciples know, when we go over the day of Pentecost, the very same thing they tell the people who are interacting with them the day of Pentecost.
So, everything that the disciples know, that they've learned, they tell that message to the people at Pentecost. They give them all the information.
When Paul also goes out, the very same message is going to give to the
So let me ask a question. Where did you get the most did everybody hear what he said? Where did you get the most comprehensive information of how the gospel works? Who gives you that information, my sister? The most comprehensive information? Which person? Sorry? You're not sure? My sister? Where did you get the most amount of information of how the gospel works? Paul. So Paul is the one that gives you all the information. In fact, if you want to understand New Testament theology, where would you go to? You go to Paul. Because if you went to the Gospels, what would you learn? Be kind to people. Be nice. Turn the other cheek. Be humble. You don't learn much theology. You learn most of the theology from the books of Paul. And who is Paul communicating with or to? We'll call it the world. So, what would that tell you? That not only the Levites need to know everything, who else needs to know everything? The world needs to know everything that we know. That's not what we commonly teach or understand. We have this idea that we have a sliding scale. We know 100% information, the Levites 50%, and the Nephilims about 10%. What could they possibly learn? What possibly could they know compared to us, a super people? Are we okay with that model? Are we okay with what Brother Roger said? That not only the Levites are going to be taught everything, the Gentiles are. And we know he's correct because we have proof. In fact, the proof is your own experience. If I were to ask you, how does the operation of the gospel after the Jewish nation, how does that work? You'd all turn to the books of Paul. His letters, his epistles, his writing. Mostly. We okay with that? So let's summarize. We have priests, Levites, and Nephilims. They are the faithful ones. And now we're saying everyone has to have the same amount of information. They all need to know the same thing. You can't cut corners.
Okay, I wanted to give that quote for where Ellen White gives that those people who have experienced the first and second angels, those who are joining the church, even they have to be under the truth of those people where they experience the first and the second angel message.
So, my brother says, there's an Ellen White quote that says, those who were not there when the first and second angels' messages were given, because they were born under the third angel, they must take instruction, they must learn from those who had the first and second angel's message, which means they must learn first and second angel's messages. The first and second angel's messages is what? In that context. Sorry? What information? It's not Revelation 14. What is it? My sister? Oh.
The everlasting gospel.
No, because that's Revelation 14. What is she saying they need to know? Sorry? Can someone repeat what she said? Oh, she's like, what? Our brother said, those people who live under the third message must learn, must get instruction from those who lived under the first and second angels' messages. And I'm saying, what must they learn? Someone said the first and second angels' message, someone said the gospel. I want to say, no, what must they learn in the context of what Ellen White is saying? Not sure? So here we are. We're in the history of the third. What date is that? My sister. The arrival of the third angel. I'm asking her. No, not in our line. In the context of that Ellen White quote. She said, those of us here today who are born under the third angel, you must listen to the first and second angels, those people who lived under that dispensation. So do you know what that date is? No? My sister? My sister? With the white frock? What's that date? 1844. We'll give the month, October 44. So if that's the third, you have the second and the first, and what date is this? Shout out. 1798. So what history is this? So she's saying, if you lived here, you need to learn and understand the right history. You need to see how God led us. So you always get brought to October 22nd, 1844. Any more thoughts or questions on this issue that everyone needs to learn the same thing? Can't cut corners.
The question on the part you have.
Oh, okay.
So, this point and the point you gave before is like the opposite. Because in the line of the disciples, we found out that when you want to understand this thing better, you need to go to Paul, which is like the ending part of it. And then you leave this beginning part. But this one is telling us again, you go to those beginning part if you want to understand the ending part.
So, Paul is a scholar. He's extremely clever, obviously. And he's going to explain to people what happened in that history. I'm not suggesting that Peter or John doesn't know or don't know what Paul knows. I'm not trying to suggest that, but all I was trying to point out is that as a minimum, the Gentiles received the same information that the disciples had. So I wasn't trying to defend the position that they are learning more information, new information, that the apostles weren't aware of, because I don't think those stories or these books are designed to teach us that. They're designed to teach us different things. And each book or each series of books, each cluster of them, can teach us different things. So, just in the context that we wanted to take, we can go to the writings of Paul to show that as a minimum, the Gentiles are learning the same information that the Jews know. He's explaining to them, and he's explaining to them in perhaps a gentle, in a careful way, because they don't know anything. So you could tell a Jew the Messiah. If you take that to a Gentile, you may have to put a lot more explanation into it. To say, for instance, the Messiah isn't good enough for them. So he'll say, you know that God over there, who you don't know their name, that's the one. So he wouldn't talk to a Jew like that, because they already know who that is. But when the Gentile, they don't know Jehovah or anything. So he says, let me tell you how it works. I've obviously done that. That's what Paul means when he says, to the Romans I was a Roman, to the Greek a Greek, etc. He adapts his teaching style to the people that he's dealing with. If you go to the book of Hebrews, when he's speaking to Jews, when you go to the book of Romans, that he's speaking to Jews, he behaves and he writes differently than he does, say, to the Corinthians or the Galatians. So I'm not suggesting they know more, and I'm not suggesting that the disciples knew less. It then goes to the question, what are the purposes of these books? What are they meant to teach us? So I'm not trying to undermine the skill and the force and the power of the apostles. We're okay with that. Any more questions or thoughts? At the back.
After Matthew 28:20.
Matthew 28:20. What's your question? Oh, this is another proof. Excellent. Matthew 28:20. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. Nice proof text. The proof text that they're supposed to be taught everything that you learn. And if they're to be taught everything, you know the Levites must as well. We're not going to skip the Levites out. Okay? So, maybe this is a new revelation to you. Maybe you haven't thought about it. That everyone needs to learn the same amount of information. Oh, at the back, sorry. No, brother?
look at that model of the big groups, the priest, the Levites, and the Levites, they're coming from the same dispensation, the 144.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of the passage from the Great Controversy, 343, that the principles of God dealing with men is ever the same. So the way he dealt with the priest is going to deal with the Levites of the heaven. He's going to give them the same message. He's not going to change how he's going to deal with the Levites of the heavens.
I like that thought, because dealings with men are ever the same. GC? 343, paragraph 1 and 2. Someone else had their hand up.
Okay, I agree with the model.
But why? If you agree, why is there a but? Because but means you don't agree.
Yeah, there's something which I also see.
So you don't fully agree.
I agree more than like when you see, we know that I agree that the Gentile or the world will have the same information. But if I try to think in the line which you brought us through the history of Apostle and Paul, I think the information which Paul gave his mother, that was given to the Bible.
So,
and if I see,
let me just address that issue. I already addressed that issue with Dickens, with my brother Dickens, that it's not extra super information that the other people don't have. Paul explains things clearly to a Gentile that he doesn't need to with a Jew. And I think that addresses the issue that Brother Kuto mentioned, that when you're living in the history of the third angel, someone needs to explain to you in detail what happened in the history of the first and second, which is what Paul is doing. The fact that you don't see it in the history of the first and second explained in the same way doesn't mean that they didn't have that understanding or they don't have that perspective. So just because the books are written that way, I don't think that's evidence to say that they have more of what these people have, especially when you start taking the proof text. And I like Matthew 28:20. You can't teach them more than you already know.
yeah, like in real life, we are in that history where we are learning what they have learned, those of familiar. But I'm also seeing that we have learned more than what they had before, right? In real life, you can prove that in 1989, we learned. But what we have now, I think, is more than that history, right? So it's the same when we are progressing, the way is opening more than the way we were. So I'm thinking when they will become in that history, everything will be clear more than thing are. That is what is going on.
So when the Nephilims comes, everything will be clearer than it is today.
I think those
Who will make it clearer?
is us.
So it must be clearer to us. So it's not clearer to them than it is to us.
Yeah.
So we're the same, which is the argument that we're using, that there's no difference in the information. Just take the Levites. The Levites don't get all the baggage that we get. All the things we've had to relearn, they don't have to relearn all of those things. They don't have to go through all the mistakes we made. We just give them the gospel as we understand it today. I agree there's going to be refinement, but pretty much everything is sorted out already for the priest, because we're at the close of probation. Pretty much everything that we need is all settled in. We just need some refinement. This is a big issue, of course. And that's what we're going to go to Levites. In fact, the argument that you're making, or that I would, not that you're making, I think that I would make is, you can't go to them until it's all sorted out. Which is what we're not ready. My sister? You had your hand up.
Yeah. So, I have a question concerning agriculture model.
You have a question concerning?
Agriculture.
Concerning, I didn't catch that, sorry. Matthias? Sorry. You have a question concerning the agricultural model.
Yeah. So, according to the line of agriculture, we have different messages that flow differently for people. Like priests, they have the message which flows in my house, and that message is not the one to pro Levite. So if it comes to the time of Levite, will they take it into it?
Okay, so it's a good question. Question is, the plowing of the Levites is different to the plowing of the priests. It's a different dispensation, it's a different issue. That's what you're saying. Yeah? So I asked the question, let me put it this way. You go into the agricultural model, and it looks like that. You agree? 4 dispensations. So this is one line, but what we can do is cut this line, can't we? You've seen elder Tess do this at this school. You cut that line. Do you agree with that? So we cut the line here, and now we've got 4 lines, all time of the ends. You agree with that? So, what's this date here? The date. Sorry? Just give us the year. So this is 19. At 89. And we'll put 21. When did you come into the church? 1, 2, 3 or 4? It's a movement, this church, I mean. 1, 2, 3 or 4? After 2014? Number 3? Yeah? So you're here. So, say I came in here. So this is me, and this is you. So, in this history, I was being tested. Yeah? Not going to use the agricultural model to do this now. I'm just going to say, I went through a testing period. Because you said each dispensation is a different test. You said that? Agree? So, I'm being tested, and this is test number 1. And what are you being tested with? A test?
I'm not tested.
Sorry?
I am not tested from that time.
You are?
I was not tested.
Yeah, you're tested here. What test number are you tested with?
From
Yeah, number 3. So you're tested with number 3. So, in order to pass test number 3, what do you need to know? Don't do it for her, please. What do you need to know? First thing you need to know is what? What your test is. If you don't know what your test is, you can't pass it. So you need to know test number 3. You agree with that? Yes? Okay? In your words, what is test number 3? What would you say test number 3 is?
It's all about equality.
Good, we'll go with that. Equality. What was in test number 1? Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And test number 2? So I'll call it 25-20, if you're okay with that. So here you are. Do you need to use the 25-20 to pass your test? I'll say it another way. You said time setting. Do you need to accept time setting in order to pass your test? Or can you say, I don't like time setting, it's rubbish, I just want to deal with equality? Can you do that? So you have to accept equality. Do you have to pass this test as well?
Yeah.
And you have to pass this test as well. This is the Sunday law issue. Yeah? So when you're here and you came in at this juncture, you still have to go to all of these past histories and pass them. You agree with that? So if you came into the movement in 2012, say, and you heard this message about time, would you have accepted that? Would you have accepted the message of time? Would you have passed test 2? Yes, you would have?
When would have accepted the first people of that?
How do you know you would have passed and not failed?
By accepting.
Yeah, but how do you know you would have accepted it? That's my question. How do you know you would accept it? What's the proof that you have that you would have accepted it?
The purpose of the gospel, when it is presented, it requires a positive reception of that message. So, all you reject it. It won't be okay.
Of course, you've got a choice to accept or reject. So tell me how you can be confident that you would have accepted that message, because you weren't here.
By understanding.
Lots of people listened to it. They had an understanding of what was being taught. I guess Elder Jeff is one of the cleverest people in our movement. He didn't accept it. He listened to it. He said it's rubbish. So what makes you so sure that you would have accepted it when the leader of the movement says he didn't accept it?
It depends on one conviction. Doesn't mean when you accept something, then I have to accept it. But the way you present it will convict the person.
How do you know it would have convicted you? Okay, I want concrete evidence how you know. We have to know for certain. We don't have to know for certain. Who needs to know for certain? Sister Emma. Who needs to know for certain whether or not my sister would have passed 2012 when she was never even tested on 2012? Who needs to know that? The universe. We'll go with that. Those people who are going to check your case, they want to make sure that we don't let any bad people into heaven. So it's bad if you reject time here. Yeah? So that means you shouldn't get into heaven. But the problem is you weren't tested on that. So they need to know whether or not you would pass that test or not, and you weren't there. You said, of course I would pass. My sister with the yellow top. I presume you came in the same time period. So you weren't here. How do you know you would have passed the second test at 25:20 on time? I don't know if you heard what she said. The test that was brought to this dispensation will also be brought here. It's not the test. This is the test, but this will be needed to get through this history. So we know that if you were back here, you would have passed that test if you've passed this test. It's a matter of accumulation. By the time you get to number 3, all 3 of these things are going to affect you in some shape or form. Can you understand equality without understanding Daniel 11:40-45? You can't. Can you accept this history of equality without understanding time setting? You can't. Because this issue here gives us a dispensation that we come out of, and now we're dealing with a separate or related issue. So you need to know all the tests that came before. They accumulate, they're not separate. So when we come to this history, we say that the ploughing for the Levites is different to the ploughing of the priests. Of course it is. The time of the end for the Levites is what, my brother? Time of the end for the Levites. 9/11. If you're at 9/11, I'm not saying we're talking to a Levite, but when we do, we're going to say, you know, at 9/11 you began your journey, but what do they need to know? They need to know 1989, don't they? Without 1989, 9/11 doesn't mean anything. So they need to know that information. Even though their former reign or their ploughing is different to ours, you still need to go back. So these Nethinims are going to have to go all the way back and understand that history. And in fact, if you read the newspapers, do they know about that? Do they know about the two former dispensations? They do. They may not know it the same way we do. They may not have the same perspective. But they realise that things changed in 1989. The relationship between the United States and then so-called USSR or Russia changed. And they can trace the rise of Putin, the rise of Trump, based upon that history. In fact, they compare John Paul with Francis, Reagan with Trump. So just by comparing that, you know that they're taking the Nethinims back 2 dispensations, which means those Nethinims are now going to be tested, even if it's in a limited fashion, on the history that we have gone through. There's no avoiding this issue. Everyone has to learn the same thing. You may ask yourself the question, well, if that's the case, we're all the same then. What's all this about the 144,000? That's a separate subject which I didn't want to address in this class, because I didn't want to bring that point forth. But what I want us to see is that the high calling of a priest is the high calling of a Levite, is the high calling of a Nethinim. It does not get easier. And why this is significant is the following. If you look at the prophetic model that conservative Adventists generally have in all their missionary endeavours, they always focus upon a few key points. The European Union, the papacy, the man of sin, what's happening in the United States, and the Sabbath Sunday issue. So they focus so much on these issues that when you start asking them, well, what does the end of the world look like? Their model is that these Nethinims who come from the world, they're going to be tested on a singular issue. Whether you choose Saturday or whether you choose Sunday. And of course that can't be correct. Can it? Only a singular issue. This is what Adventists teach. I've noticed in Elder Tess's classes that we're having here, people have just said, no, that can't be correct. Can't be a singular issue. But I think some of us in this class are in the same position as our Adventist brothers and sisters. We have a one-track mind. What is our one-track mind? What's the symbol for that? Louder. No. Go back to Sister Tess's class. What's the point she's trying to drive home, or beginning to? But she meets resistance. Raphia. We have a problem with Raphia because we have a one-track mind. Because we are Laodicean in our thinking. We've inherited this condition, this disease, if you like, that we think it's a one-dimensional problem. Even if it was just a Sabbath Sunday issue, that was true, and it's not. It's not just that one issue that's confronting the world. It's a multifaceted problem, much more complex than that. And it's the complexity that actually proves and shows us that there is no Saturday, Sunday issue, because it will not work. It doesn't work in the model and it doesn't work in the real world. We in the movement, and my brother said, we're much better than the Millerites because we've learnt a lot from them. In fact, we haven't learnt that much from them. We have this one-track mind that we think is all about raffia. And what Elder Tess in her classes is trying to do is do you understand what weaning is? When you take a child off breast milk, yeah? She's trying to wean us off this mindset of this singularity that we have. Because it's destroying our understanding of what 2019 is and what November the 9th was. We're not understanding how you go from the literal to the spiritual. Part of the problem is, whether we're doing it deliberately or inadvertently, maybe we talk about it, but the people who are driving the agenda of Future for America, they seem to be in control of the narrative of what defines what is right and what is wrong. Their accusations that we have a false message because nothing happened in November the 9th. Elder Tess is beginning to try to explain this, but the only way we're ever going to get this is once we start looking at these lines in the way that they were originally taught, but in a way that many of us have not understood. You cannot tackle our history in just one linear fashion, which is raffia. She's already posed the question, why do we even call it raffia? And there may be arguments, good arguments for that. But once those good arguments are made, and we have that one hook, that one attachment point, we're carried there, and we haven't moved on in our thinking. And many of us have not paid attention to the stories of Pyrrhus and what they actually mean. It's not a matter of having two competing battles. Raffia and... It's not two competing battles that's the problem. Raffia or Aslam, take your pick. We can put an R or an A, it's either one. They mean the same thing. They don't mean the same thing. If we're not willing to rethink the way we approach inspiration, we will fail. Many of us are already struggling here in this class. That's why we're here, to learn together. This is part of the lack of harmony that we have. We don't actually fully understand our message, and part of the reason for that is because we're actually going to the wrong source of information. Some of us here are actually listening to the arguments that Future for America have instead of actually listening to the person that the Lord has raised up to explain 2019, but obviously it goes way back before that, and also the history in which we're now currently in. There's more to talk about that and what the issues are. But I want us to be careful about how we're approaching her classes. I've noticed that people seem to approach the class as though they know more than she does, or their perspective is the right one and they need to instruct or teach her. If you believe that to be the case, maybe you should come up and teach. And I don't mean that in a rude and disrespectful way. I know, because I speak with her, I have confidence in the Lord and His direction, that she has light to help guide us through 2019, because we're not even out of 2019. I don't mean the year, I mean in our thinking. You need to take whatever's going on in this history and bring it into our history. We still haven't completed that work yet. and we don't have a clear understanding of November the 9th, which also needs to be addressed. There are far too many people who think that they know the answers to these questions, and I know the reason I know we don't is because we're not in even a time period where we should be able to understand those things. These are prophetic arguments. For someone to stand up and say they have answers to some of these problems, to me, is indicating that they don't even actually understand how the lines are constructed, which is a problem that we were confronted with Brother Theodore when he started projecting into the future dates. The methodology that he's used to do that, we don't recognize. It's either some super development that we'll need to get on board with, or it's a parallel track to the path that we're on. And if you have a parallel track, you know that's the track of error. The methodology that he's used to create those dates that he handles. The fact that he has similar dates to us is not evidence that there's light in his message. It should be evidence for you that people can be half right and half wrong. Enough about that. We'll come to the end of our class. What I want us to see is that priests, Levites, and Nethinim, however we understand what the 144,000 are, and I don't want to do a study on that subject, in order to even look at that subject, we have to understand who these people are. The first thing that we're recognizing in our class is that there's not some kind of scale, some quality that we're better than others, that we know more than others. I don't think that is what these lines are teaching. If that's not what they're teaching, then we need to reevaluate, rethink perhaps, depending on what model you have, of what qualifies a person to be 144,000, besides it just being priest. It's not just that we know more than other people. We've got proof texts, we've got models that show that. We've dealt with Matthias. Matthias is, I'm suggesting, showing someone who becomes a symbol of organization. If we're okay with that concept, with that idea. My sister, did you want to make a comment about Matthias?
Let me comment.
Did you want to? I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment. My sister and I spoke about Matthias during the break, so I just want to give her an opportunity. She wanted to share her thoughts with the class. She shared it with me. I thought they had merit to them, so I want her to share it if she wants to.
Okay, so I was thinking of Matthias, and the Bible is clear that it's the person who replaced Judas. And from the line of Christ overlaid with the line of the priests, we understand that shortly before the cross, you see, Judas fixed the Christ movement. So I took that principle from Judas and applied to our line that shortly before November 9th, the cross, we see Jeff leading the movement. And the connection we shared with the Parminder is that it's not in every aspect that Judas is equal with FFA or Jeff. The principle, the logic we had is that the FFA, we understand is the movement where we have come from, and is the one which was supporting this movement. So they quitted with all the money that they had, and Judas was a treasurer. Therefore, Matthias
or Matthias did not come to replace Judas in the aspect of being a treasurer, but to make that number complete. Symbology of leadership. I think I did that.
Good. Let's pray. I hope everybody heard that. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. It's our prayer and our hope that this school becomes an instrument, a tool in your hand to bring all of us here in East Africa into harmony one with another. We know that you're doing a special work for your people. We know that if we are faithful here at this school, that not only will we learn, but as people hear these messages across the world, they too will join with us and learn with us. We ask, Lord, that you would bless us according to your will. In Jesus' name, amen.